Thanks to Joe and Chris. Without their videos, I wouldn't be able to make this one. Links to their videos will be in the description. So lately I've been having problems with my car horn. I haven't been able to honk at anyone who've been cutting me off. So if you're having problems with your car horn or the accessories on your steering wheel aren't working, maybe you need to change your clock spring. So you start off by taking off the trim. There are 3 screws on the bottom. There's another screw on the handle of the steering wheel height adjuster. Now you can start taking apart the trim. I find it easier pulling from the other side. I'm doing such a bad job on this, I don't know why. But yeah, I'm struggling here to pull it off, but you'll see as I pull from the passenger side, it comes out, but then it gets kind of a little hung up on the handle for the height adjuster. But it eventually pulls out pretty easily. There you go. The top trim is actually not attached to anything, so just lower the steering wheel and you can just slide it right off. Make sure to disconnect the battery since you're going to be working on the airbag so it doesn't accidentally explode when you're working on it. So next we're going to take the airbag out. As you can tell already, I'm doing voiceover because my phone mic wasn't doing so good. So you'll see me try to gently pull out this screw because I didn't want it to fall in. But if it does, you can actually get to it when you pull out the airbag. So the bit kept falling out of the 8mm long socket, so you can just MacGyver it and find something to put between the socket and the bit to keep it secure. So after you get the 2 screws out, you can actually pull out the airbag. I turned it 180 degrees and was able to actually lay it on the steering wheel itself so I can get easy access to unplug the wires. I tried using a flathead screwdriver, but the one I was using was a little dull. So I actually went and found a one that was more sharper so I can actually get under the tabs. There's actually a little groove there you can actually slip it into, but this particular screwdriver was just too thick. So you see this one's goes in a lot easier. After you've lifted the black tabs, you can just pull the wires out. So I placed the airbag face up on the passenger side, just in case. I have a 19mm socket. Yeah, so I just used this socket. I put my knees against the steering wheel and then I just tugged with the breaker bar. You take the nut off, you can try pulling at the steering wheel. If it doesn't come off very easily, you might need a steering wheel puller. If you do, you can put the nut back on just so there's a larger surface area for the puller to work on. And just screw it on until it's flush to the nub. So this is a steering wheel puller kit. You can rent these from your local car parts supply store. So it includes all the different parts to accommodate all the different type of steering wheels out there. So I'm just pulling out the ones that I need for my car. So for this particular model of steering wheel puller, you just take the black screw tip off, screw it through the metal piece, and then as it gets through, you just put the tip back on. That tip will go against the steering wheel nut. So there are pre-drilled holes in the steering wheel where you can stick in these 2 screws. And if your screws don't fit, just go back to the kit and get ones that actually fit. So I had to actually take one of the screws off in order to fit this metal piece in. So once you have the 2 screws in, you just tighten the black screw until it's flush against the center nut. So I just took a wrench and I tightened the black center nut against the steering wheel until you hear the steering wheel pop open or it snaps open. Again, I used my knees to hold the steering wheel in place as I turned. The mic didn't pick up the sound of the steering wheel popping open, but it's actually loose now. You can see me shaking it. Do you take off the steering wheel puller? You can take the nut off so you can pull off the steering wheel. But just look here, you'll see a line. It should be lined up, but mine's a little bit off. It's just there, so when you put on your steering wheel on, you will be able to line it up. For my car. Okay. So the 2 wires that are connected to the airbag, it's hooked up under this plastic tang. You can just pull it out of the way so it doesn't get caught in it when you pull out the steering wheel. This little plug, there's a notch on the left that you press, and then you can easily pull it out. This particular plug was a little hard to pull. I actually had to put my camera down and use 2 hands. But I basically pressed on this with one hand and I pulled on it with the other hand and it came off loose. So the plugs down here on the bottom, they were a little difficult to actually release. I actually used a flathead screwdriver to push on the tabs, but I actually broke the yellow one, so just be extra careful when you release these ones. So next, there are 2 Phillips head screws. You just loosen them. They don't actually come out of the hole, so just loosen them until they're out of their socket. I basically just loosened it up. Finally, the last thing to release the clock spring is a little tab on top. So I'm just putting the old clock spring next to the new clock spring just to compare them. Just making sure they look exactly the same and they got the right part. So the new clock spring actually has a plastic holder on it to keep it on center, because there's actually a limit to how far the clock spring can actually turn. So you don't actually take off that plastic holder until you're ready to put on the steering wheel. So the next thing is to move the windshield wiper stock and the turn signal stock from the old clock spring to the new clock spring. You can see there's tabs on the top and the bottom. You just press them and you can pull it out and put it into the new clock spring. So when you move the stock from the old clock spring to the new clock spring, just make sure the plug actually goes into the socket in the back. Now we can reassemble the clock spring and the steering wheel. You also notice the video will be sped up a little bit because everything is just being reinstalled in reverse. After you put the tab in on the top, screw in the 2 screws in the bottom. Next, install the plug in the top and the bottom. Next, put the steering wheel back on. Before installing the steering wheel, make sure to take out the plastic tab that's keeping the clock spring position locked. Same spot. So you know you put the steering wheel on correctly when you see the plug on the clock spring come through into that notch and the line on the steering wheel lines up with the line on the steering wheel knuckle. And again, my line doesn't line up correctly. It's just different on my car for some reason, but yours should be lined up. So I'm just tightening the nut with by hand just so I make sure I don't cross thread it. Okay, I don't know exact torque measurements, but I'm just going to tighten as much as I can. So I just plug in that plug and the wires that go to the airbag. I just tuck it under this plastic tab on the bottom. And then get these back on. Make sure the black tabs on the airbag wires are lifted before you actually install them onto the airbag. Lock the plugs in by pushing down on the black tabs. Connect the battery so we can test the clock spring. So before I put all the rest of the screws in, I'm going to just test and make sure everything is still working. Alright, let's turn on the engine. Let's see, car is turning on. See if the horn works. Yes, it. So proceed to test the buttons on the steering wheel, the turn signals, and the windshield wipers, and everything worked fine. But I did buy another clock spring before this one. When I installed it, nothing worked. So if yours doesn't work, hopefully it's just a bad clock spring and nothing worse. Well, that's it. I hope this video helped you out, and I hope you learned something. Lifted, and I just lifted the whole steering wheel all the way to the highest points. I find it easier if I try to put the bottom trim on first so I can get this handle in and through the hole. I was having a really hard time with this, but you can see that I actually push the metal tab of the steering wheel height adjuster through the hole. I found that the trim was pretty durable. You didn't really have to be soft about it. You can bend it and it should be fine. As you can see, my bottom trim actually scratched the trim that was under the steering wheel. So if you have a better method, please leave a comment below. Awesome. Now, if any of you guys plan to cut me off, you're going to hear me honk.